Anton, thanks for giving us your time this afternoon. This is all about an exploratory conversation, essentially, just to hear a little bit about you and your story, your professional journey, and what you see lying ahead. So, I guess the best way for me to kick this chat off is to hand it over to you and say, please introduce yourself to me and the listeners. Where did this journey to be a sports scientist and head of performance start, and what were the interesting caveats that you've experienced along the way?
Thanks very much, Rich. Much appreciated for having us on to chat. So, going back a long time ago now, it feels 20 years ago, probably to be exact. So, obviously, from a sports science point of view, was a field football player. I think as most sports scientists from that era, started off as a coach, going through college, field football player, injury, and so on. Decided to go to university after college. At that point, was getting treated by the ex-head physio at Celtic, and he had put us on to the head of sports science, Anton McElhone, at Celtic, and I was doing a project. Went in for the day, bit of shadowing, and then sort of the burning desire to work in football as a practitioner in science and in the fitness industry was born that sort of year, so like 2022, just before Seville. So it was one of these things. Kenny McMillan at the time gave us a lot of time and effort, explained what you need to be if you want to work in football at the highest level. Go and get your master's degree, go and do your education, some of the courses in England, all the different things that you needed. For a 2-3 year period, went on that journey. So master's degree from Edinburgh University in strength conditioning, CSCS, get Isaac, get Fitness Trainers Award, SAQ, all these different things, polar heart rate. So 20 years ago, that was the sort of journey. The big aspiration was always to work with a manager, go in as part of that coaching staff. So obviously over many years working at Hibs for 3 years, going to Tottenham for 10 years, working at the academy, then first team level, and then moving obviously on to America with Brad Friedel. That was the big opportunity, going to sort of the coaching staff with it, and obviously spent a great year in America. And then from there, the sports science, obviously, in coaching, joined ahead, obviously going into a coaching role in the return to the UK. And then from there, moving to Celtic in the last few years, sort of been recruited by a recruitment company for the expertise in management, sports science, performance, medical, all these different areas. So these were the reasons why Celtic, I would like to think, employed us, and obviously the last 2 seasons we've had some great success and hopefully been able to add a little bit of value to the club.
You mentioned obviously starting out doing that shadowing work with Kenny, and then going on and doing your academic courses and your subsequent roles at the different clubs. How have you seen the industry change, I suppose, over the last 20 years whilst you've done that? And I mean broadly from, the requirement maybe to do those academic courses and some now, or, perhaps the roles and responsibilities that you had that maybe look a bit different today, or not, as the case may be. I'm really curious to see, and hear what your thoughts are on that.
I think the industry's grown hugely. If you go back 20 years ago, you're Strudwicks yourself. There's many of the guys that came from Loughborough, Sam Harris, all these people that lead in the industry. Back then, it would be a 1-2 man department. I think what you're now getting is a huge department in the performance and sports science. I think the actual role of the sports scientist, where I think most sports scientists back in the day were generalists, the nutrition, S&C, sports science, physiology, whereas now I think the industry and the departments are a little bit more specific. The departments are bigger. There is more clarity to sports scientists, GPS data. Obviously, back in the day, it was heart rate monitors for that internal load / external. I think that the big changes there. I think it's been huge. I think obviously the industry's grown. The importance is still felt, but I think the basic foundations are still the same. 20 years ago, whether it's like your Raymond Verheijen's, the actual philosophies and principles, I don't think they've changed. I think obviously as practitioners, we've changed. The industry's evolved. There is more tech, there is more staff, there is more finances to really grow the departments. I think from even at Tottenham, when it was Sam Erith, Nathan Gardner, myself, working in the academy, there was 3 staff plus 2 interns. And we would always be looking, you look at the Italian teams, the Milan lab, the staff that they had, And now you can see that like 5 years later, that, you know, you look at Tottenham now, multiple staff on top of what Conte had, you know. So I think all the Premier League clubs have exploded. Your teams in Scotland are growing, you know. So I think all around the world, whether it's MLS, everything's expanding and really opening up and being more open to sports science as a support.
My takeaway from what you just had to say there was, you know, the fundamentals underpinning the discipline, you know, have somewhat remained the same, but the environment's changed dramatically in terms of volume of people and you know, maybe uber specialists in certain particular sort of professional lanes. Do you think that that's equally applicable? You talked about England and Scotland, in the US as well. You know, you had some time in the MLS with New England, right? So do you see the same thing there?
Yeah, I think obviously, you know, that England was, from a staffing structure, elite level, EPPP, the actual structures and foundations are far greater England to Scotland. Scotland is definitely developing. Celtic, Rangers, Hearts, Hibs, Aberdeen, they're improving, but again, it's probably still quite a few years behind. I think America, due to the finances, they are, you know, accelerated, you know, been over there. The standards and structures were improving. Stadiums, training facilities were all first class, but I think the support, Zone 7s in America, all the different companies that are getting involved because they're getting finances, I think that's been the big reason why MLS is going bigger than other countries, because of the financial. But I think it really is improving all round. But again, it's worth saying that the actual basics, the foundations, staffing structures are still the same. But I think people are becoming more specialised in more certain areas. But the most important things on the pitch: if players fit, are they available? That's the most important things for a manager. Have you got your best players on the pitch to actually win games, and enough games to win to hopefully be successful? So
as an individual and as a department, it's essentially servicing the manager and the club's needs, right, and their goals. On your sort of current situation at Celtic, you know, as a performance leader, what would you say the biggest challenges are? And I'm linking it to what you've just told us, I suppose, around that explosion in you know, volume of people that are inputting into the service that you're supplying every day. You know, the organizational objectives and the manager objectives are still the same. Players on pitch, players available to compete in matches, right? So what are your challenges, I suppose, around that organization, workflow, environment, that sort of thing?
Probably two areas: relationships, communication. I think that's the same for all clubs, no matter around the world, what language you speak. You know, so do we have a common language at the club? Do we speak football? At the end of the day, that is the company. You know, their job is, you know, whether it's medical, science, recruit, you know, can we find fit players who are available to play? I think, you know, keep them injury free. I think that's the biggest thing is strong relationships between the management, coaching staff, interdisciplinary. So whether it's the medical department, the recruitment, the information's being shared, conversations, because we can all send an email, we can all send data, but you know, the nuts and bolts is actually sitting down, having conversations, and actually doing the simple stuff. You know, what is going to keep a player on the pitch? Is it, you know, they do less, they do more? What are we actually interpreting with the data rather than just throwing it to the manager? Again, we still have to let the coach and management staff dictate and, you know, guide. That's their job. You know, they're here, they could be here 1 year, 2 year. They've got a small time period. We might be there longer because we're club employees, but we need to support the coaching staff as much as possible, that we've got a football programme in place, but also that it supports the manager's philosophy. So I think regardless of the manager, we've always got to come in and re-educate ourselves, be adaptable, flexible, just like players have to be. You know, you can't just play one position. You know, if there's change at the club like we're going through at the moment, we need to be adaptable. What does the manager want? What's the needs? What's the needs of the playing system that might evolve, and so on? So we need to be on the front foot and make sure we're adaptable. I think obviously communication is huge, as well as strong relationships, but actually, you know, rather than it just being an email, rather than just putting data out there, you have the small, simple conversations with players, coaching staff, management, and actually try to get a good culture at the club. I think that's one of the key things at Celtic, is being, you know what you want, there's certain ways that you would like to do it, but being patient. Can you get the input from the players? still have to listen to them. You have to give a little bit back to them rather than about what do we always want. So I think they're two of the key areas for me: communication and relationships, and obviously the intermingle with each other quite a lot.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. And I'm sure that's absolutely applicable the world over in all those different cultures and environments. Relationship and communication, being key. So how you're flexible and adaptable to different coaches and the different methodologies and demands that they'd have. Is there, I suppose, anything that you feel as though that you have to do to sort of stay on top of that? And you said about being on the front foot. So, new ways of working, assessing the landscape so that I suppose the relationship you build with the coaching staff and the communication that you have with them gives them what they want.
Yeah, I think in the sort of short term, one of the biggest challenges coming to Celtic was working with the new staff in the sports science medical sort of department, because for several years was in a coaching department, assistant manager, interim manager, etc.
Yeah.
So the conversations are slightly different. This is how we want to work. You're then part of a team, so you've then got to communicate, understand other people, whether it's data technology. Everybody's coming away from Excel, Tableau, Power BI, so adapting what we're looking for there. How can your processes be quicker, cleaner? But it also gets back to the data, the numbers. Speaking to the coaches, speaking to the staff. That's the things where I have the experience of 15, 20 years within the game, whether it's coaching, sports science, S&C, rehab, understanding what is right, what is wrong, doing the basics well. So are we coaching the right way? Are we doing the right things on the pitch and off the pitch? It's sometimes not about the fancy technology, but I think like that, from Tottenham, where they were looking at AI a decade ago, with Wayne Diesel on injury prediction, the models we've got now through Zone 7 it's taken on a different level, but we're evolving with it. It's teaching us, so that's keeping me grounded and moving forward rather than being stuck in the past. We'll look at these metrics, we'll look at these areas. The last 2 years at Celtic working with Zone 7 has really opened us up another level, looking at different areas, looking at things that could impact performance, increase or decrease injury factors. So that's one of the things that I think has been really helpful for me, looking at the new technologies as well as going back to old school principles.
Sure. And do you find, listening to what you were saying there, taking on an innovative mindset whilst making sure you stay honest to your kind of core principles of what works from a practitioner perspective. But do you find yourself, I suppose, being a filter for lots of information coming from that multidisciplinary team, and I suppose in a way making sure you translate that for the people who need to receive it in a way that they need to receive it, not in a way that perhaps is a bit too techie or a bit too medicalized, that sort of thing? Are you that conduit, or do you find that you have multiple people that are giving those messages?
I think obviously the staffing structure at Celtic's grown over the years. So I think, that there is a part of me that you're in the middle, you're having to explain and reduce. Every manager and coaching staff will have a different knowledge and understanding of sports science and medical, so that differs. So under a Pochettino, he might want an extensive amount of information for his staff to digest. Postecoglou might want a reduced amount, but he wants clean, simple facts. We don't want to go into too much detail. So I think that changes per club, per staff, per age group. I think it's never just the same. And I think that's where the experience of what our coach is looking for, because I've been medical, coaching, sports science, that whole performance model, I understand the different languages, so I can sort of translate a little bit from each department to try and bring it together so that we're speaking a language. So football being the number one, we need to speak and understand that language and then simplify your language, whether it's medicine, science, and interpret into that depending on who the coach is. So there is definitely a part of it. I wouldn't say it's a huge part of the job, because at the end of the day, the coaching staff at Celtic were very organised, very clean. John Kennedy, the assistant manager, is still at the club. So again, he led the programme, so it was very easy. Whereas other managers, you might have a bigger input to how are we training, what do we need. This is a guy who's been working in the industry for a long time, worked with some top managers. So it's been very easy because the model's already there from previous managers. And again, it's quite easy to have a plan, we're organised, and so on.
Thinking about, I suppose, the conversation that we're having has been very dialed into, the challenges of that day-to-day workflow and collaborating, communicating, and the relationships that you've got with your colleagues. How do you, I suppose, know if you and the performance support team, the medical team, have been successful? And how do you communicate that sort of internally? Because I know that football is very emotive, and there's lots of stakeholders with opinions, and people can have a perspective that might not always be sort of on point with how the things in the background are working. So the team behind the team, how do you, as one of the leaders in that space, sort of communicate the value that you and the team are bringing to the organisation?
It's a difficult one because, first and foremost, winning matches, providing the coaching staff with high player availability and a high fitness level. So their vision and aims at Celtic and the department is to be the fittest team in Europe, to give the highest player availability to the coaching staff. That gives a higher chance of success. So coming into Celtic, first 3 months we had a horrendous injury record. Again, certain things were put in place, certain things were modified. We were again looking at Zone 7, looking at our data. How can we improve, adapt to the new coaching structure? That flattened out. We had a fantastic success in the second half of the season. So again, winning games, playing an attractive way that the manager would like, but obviously being successful. So like that, we have won 5 trophies out of 6 in the last 2 years under the previous manager. So that is that ultimate part, is you want to be successful on the pitch. That could also be different. So at Tottenham, we were competing for Champions League, competing for the leagues. We never won anything, but the division was a different competitor. It was a lot more competitive, more teams. Again, Scotland, England, very different. But again, I think regardless, the simple language is you've got to win games. If you're winning games, you get more time in the job. You can then improve the department, improve the structures. I think in the 2 years under Ange, we really did improve things. We added a lot of new interventions to the club that was already in existence. But again, winning games is first and foremost. Now, that can come the other way. You can still win games, still be successful, but you could have a horrendous injury record. I think in the time in England, I'm very reflective on what we do. So whether it's not our fault, we should always still look at how can we improve. So we might have a low injury record, but how can we make that better for the following season? How can we make that better year upon year? What can we do to improve the individual development of the player and the team? I think there are 2 key things. There's the team, but there's the non-squad, the guys that are not playing. There's all the different groups. Can we make sure we look after everyone rather than it just being the starter? So it's difficult. I think it can be misleading because you can win stuff, but the other part to that is, you could be Man City. There's going to be costs because when you're fighting on all fronts, there's going to be casualties. So again, I think adapting and understanding, you will have damage along the way, but it's reducing that damage, because if you don't have a fully fit squad, you won't go to the latter stages in all competitions. So I think for us, it is winning games and it is winning trophies. I'm not going to lie about that. But again, that can be contradictory for the club as well, because it can sometimes pay for the cracks. But again, I think if we are on the front foot and looking reflective, you'll see a bigger picture. What do we need to do? So this year and last year, I think we're probably similar in injury rates, but a little bit more at the end of the year. But again, this year compared to last year, World Cup year, different winter break, these things have probably got a factor as well, which is tough to compare to the previous year. But again, I think it's, for me, winning trophies.
Yeah, sure. And there's so much that contributes to that, right? It's kind of peel back the layers and understand, I suppose, what's important for you in your lane that feeds into that. And you talk about player availability, ability to be physically capable to deliver the demands, I suppose, of the style of football that the head coach wants to deliver. Do you have, a specific suite of tools and products that you use to help you achieve those goals? You've mentioned GPS already as being probably sort of a foundational piece of tech that's been around for a long time now. Is there a set suite of products that you have? Is that always evolving? What's your mindset on that?
I think it has evolved, obviously, in the time. I think, safe to say, that in the first year we used Catapult, second year at Celtic we used StatSport at first team, again to give us a greater understanding to the intensity matrix for how the manager wanted to play and what I had been used to at previous clubs, whether it was MLS or Premier League. That definitely was a big impact this year. And obviously the data from Zone 7 backed that up, because obviously the flagging system was coming up on Axel, DCL, etc., HML. So again, that was something that we did adapt and evolve. I think obviously the simple practices of how do we train, what do we do pre, post, how do we manage all players, going back to basic principles of, what is your match day -1, what's your match day +2, sticking to key principles on the pitch and off the pitch is for me the number one. The actual data, so like that, data doesn't lead the practices at Celtic, whether it was Ange, whether it's Brendan, but it supports and guides. It will add another layer on so we can have a look like that. If you can't look with your eyes and see certain things, players tired, players fatigued, have a conversation with a player who fills his wellness in, you have a chat in the gym or the treatment room. I think the basic things are key. The basic principles of planning, preparation, whether it's resistance training, we do use iso-inertial, we'll use different technologies for rate of force development, we're using different, obviously, products, Valve, we're going down the Power BI route for our data collection. So again, there's all different areas that we're going down, but again, it must come back to the basic principles of how do we train, how do we play, how do we recover, and then adapt to that. So again, we put it as world-class basics, and people are expecting newfangled technology all the time. But it's how we actually deal with what we've got. So, like, for example, Zone 7, we get the data coming in. I think the great analogy for the different clubs we spoke to was it's like an additional member of staff. They're sitting in another room, they're collecting all the data, they're filtering it for you and then giving you the risk factors. But again, it's then taking that on board, figuring out how we're going to use that. Is it safe? Are we worried? But also using your own principles. So it's a culmination of both rather than it being one or the other. We're merging it. Sometimes it'll be more stronger one side than it is the other. But again, it's utilising the technology, Zone 7, GPS, all the different areas that we use, and then putting it into the basic principles of how do we want to train and play.
Yeah. I hear you loud and clear. Do the basics well and harmonise that with adding, more sophisticated layers in from a tech perspective. And I think that, yourself and other clubs and organizations around the world that do that well, obviously get, solid outcomes from doing that. That's the situation today. And obviously it's evolved since 20 years ago when you first started on this journey. Where do you anticipate the evolution to go probably in the next 20 years? What do you see as the almost the next arms race, I suppose, in this performance space?
I think obviously you had your internal and external load. I think looking at the mind is part of the body as well. Everybody's now going down, it's not, we don't just train things separately, physical, technical, tactical, it's all within. So I think the mind is a huge thing. Obviously teams like Liverpool, they're going through different systems at looking at how players are actually understanding, developing. I think that's a key part for us, vision and awareness, which is obviously something that's been going on for decade, 2 decades, whether it was at Man U, English rugby. I think they things are a key thing, obviously, with the AI, utilising all the different areas. I think AI, for me, first sort of touched on it at Tottenham under Wayne Diesel. He was already doing exploratory stuff, looking at our data, trying to predict the injuries. But I think it's evolved hugely over the decade. But I think it will continue to grow because it's like GPS has grown over the last 15 years. Clubs like Middlesbrough were using it back in the 90s, but it's evolved. But again, it's still got the same principles, but it's grown arms and legs. So I think definitely with AI, I think is AI, the mind are 2 areas for me that it's fully developing, because it's the mind controls everything. So like that, whether it's fatigue, freshness, if the body's fatigued, you go back to your principles. What do we need to do? Do we need more recovery? Do we need to push them more, etc.? I think that will be a big factor in how we actually look at stuff as well as we go down the coming years.
Yeah, Anton, love it. I mean, it excites me and frightens me at the same time, trying to figure out how we're going to incorporate cognitive data sets in and harmonize that with physical data sets. But for sure, I think that'll be the way it goes. And maybe that is the caveat for AI and the challenge for AI as well, to incorporate those kind of things. Anton, it was a pleasure listening to you and hearing your thoughts and having a run through of your career so far. I wish you all the very best for the forthcoming season, and I'm sure we'll catch up soon and see if your forecasts for the future come true.
Much appreciated, guys.
Top man. Cheers, Anton. Thanks very much, pal.
Cheers.
If you want to hear more from Zone 7 and our Performance Hub, you can follow us at the website zone7.ai, or follow us wherever you listen to your podcasts. There'll be an episode every month, and you can find out more information by following our Twitter account and also on LinkedIn. Thanks.